My name is Willy Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. Well, we are here with Steve Lewarne with AVEVA, and thank you for being here, Steve. We got to talk several weeks ago, and you shared a lot about your company and your industry, and you said a few things that really kind of tickled my ears. But let's dive right in and tell us, what is technical sales?
Sure. So technical sales. So I think technical sales really refers to sales that will tend to be complex in nature, will tend to be, as the name implies, technical. So there'll be specifications or requirements of a technical nature. So not just preferences like, hey, I like a green shirt versus a blue shirt, but real hard specifications about, could be sizes of equipment, could be speeds and feeds of equipment, could be number of users in our case for software, capabilities of software, et cetera. So technical sales really applies to, I think, products that are, as we mentioned, technical in nature, of course, but are complex to understand and sensitive to the application. Meaning you could apply technical products in the correct way, you could apply them in the incorrect way. And while I suppose you could say the same for shirts, not so much the case as when typically business to business, a large company may be using technical software in the case of AVEVA, or other equipment in the case of other industrial companies. And it's important that you use that right, that you use that in a way that complements the system that the products will be used in. So we think not just in applications of technical products, we think not just of the product and the specifications of the product itself, but also the system that it's going to be a part of, and ensuring that that system is, of course, meeting the needs of the customer and allowing them to really drive improvements in their business. Either in our case with industrial software, we focus on things like efficiency, sustainability, throughput, understanding the business as a whole. But the ultimate benefit for the customer comes either in the form of reduction in costs, through that could be inefficiencies in resource utilization, that could be lost material due to poor manufacturing practices, or increases in revenue, right? That could be from producing more goods in a given time period because they avoided downtime, or they were able to more efficiently apply their resources, both raw resources as well as the human resources in the process to deploy those. So technical solutions and technical sales really has to encompass all of that. And to be effective in technical sales, we have to understand the customer's perspective and really what they're trying to achieve, and how what we're trying to sell plays a role in that. And that often requires long sales cycles and complex sales cycles, because typically these solutions are part of a much larger system.
This content is brought to you by the TIES Sales Showdown. That's the Technical, Industrial, and Engineering Student Sales Showdown, hosted right here at Texas A&M University. We have over 200 engineering students taking sales classes every semester, and a growing minor program in technical sales. These students are smart enough for STEM and savvy enough for sales, and the TIES Showdown allows them to demonstrate their selling skills in a role-play competition where industry partners, like you, serve as judges and provide them coaching feedback. If you're hiring for technical, industrial, or engineering sales roles anytime in the next couple of years, this is an event you can't miss. You can learn more at tx.ag/TIES. That's tx.ag/TIES. Hope you can join us. And so, AVEVA does industrial technology software for industrial applications. Can you give us, maybe not a completely concrete, fully fleshed out example, but,
Sure.
Give us enough information so that we understand exactly the context, right?
Yeah.
What would a company be experiencing that would give rise to the need for what you guys do? What would you do to fix it? What's the value that results?
Sure. So at AVEVA, we like to say that we spark industrial ingenuity by connecting people with trusted information and insights to drive responsible use of the world's resources. So for us, kind of going back to that, I think it was Simon Sinek, right? The why. The why is first, right? Why? So why am I at AVEVA? Why does AVEVA exist? And what do we look to do? Well, we do. We look to help industrial companies really understand better ways to utilize their resources to become more efficient, to support sustainability. We are wholly owned by Schneider Electric, who's a large industrial electrical concern, right? And sustainability is a really key concern for us. But so how do we accomplish that? We offer software. Different pieces of our portfolio address different parts of the industrial life cycle. If we think about an industrial plant, it could be a refinery, it could be a water wastewater plant, it could be a food and beverage plant. We have software that goes from the design, so that is mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, structural engineers, right, designing those plants and those facilities, through to the operation. That is, once those plants have been constructed and move into an operation phase, we have software that allows, you've probably seen the software in control rooms if you've ever seen How It's Made or one of these shows, that allows operators to monitor the process. We also collect data from the process that allows analysis of that. So when we talk about the next phase, which is optimization, right, then how do we optimize the operation of that? So we really cover the whole life cycle there, from designing those facilities in the first place to be constructed and operating those facilities. And once up and operational, to optimizing those for, again, it could be throughput to reduce inefficiencies in the terms of energy waste, right? If we think about sustainability, to become more really efficient overall. So we have a variety of pieces of software in our platform that serve the different needs of customers throughout that life cycle. But we really cover the whole gamut, and that's what we do. And really the value proposition to customers is right, more efficient design, more efficient operations, and then being able to continuously optimize over time. Because, of course, as customers build these facilities, right, and many of these facilities were built a long time ago, right, 40, 50 years ago, the needs change, the markets that they serve change, their customer demands change on them, the regulatory environment that they operate in changes and has changed quite a bit over the lifetime of many of these facilities. So the ability to operate and optimize, modernize, right, the operation of these plants to meet customer demands in new regulatory environments. So we help our customers solve those issues, again, with the why being really to focus on sustainable use of resources and efficiency.
Okay. Man, but it's all software. You guys don't do any hardware.
We do not. Our parent company, Schneider, does some hardware, but we do not do hardware. So we focus in the software domain. And oftentimes, software is where a lot of the value is realized. So if we think about the equipment that's deployed in plants, it could be automation equipment, it could be robotics, it could be individual sensors, right? They all generate a tremendous amount of data. So software is where we collect that data, where we can do, I'll say, supervisory control. So I would differentiate that from regulatory control. So if you think about safety and regulatory control, running industrial equipment, which could be dangerous, and having safety be local to the equipment. So we're thinking about things like light curtains, where if somebody breaks a light beam and equipment shuts down to avoid injury and things like that, that all runs locally. We talk about supervisory control. We mean things like starting processes, stopping process, changing recipes, if you will, which could be recipes in a food and beverage plant, or they could be recipes for steel, right, in a steel. Software allows us to control those things. And then as we collect data from those sensors over time, we now have a time series historical view of that data. And we can start to do some really, really powerful things, Willie, like looking at what is a normal operation of equipment versus what is abnormal operation. And not in terms of, hey, this equipment stopped working or it's making loud noises, right? But we can detect minute changes in the behavior of equipment. And that's what we call predictive analytics. So now we can predict that there may be a problem developing with a piece of equipment.
I was about to ask you, as kind of a lead indicator of shutdown or something, sure.
Exactly, to avoid shutdown. So if we think about a lot of industries, some in particular, if we think about petrochemical or heavy chemical industries, which are continuous process. And what I mean by that is once we start a process and we're feeding, it could be crude oil or other chemical precursors into that plant, that runs continuously. It never stops. They don't run that in batches, and they get finished goods, in the way of, if we think about a refinery, gasoline, different grades of diesel and gasoline and oils and other other materials out of that plant. But unplanned shutdowns in those facilities can cost in the tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And it can take, days to recover from an event like that to get a plant restarted. So being able to use that data to understand ahead of time when a problem might develop, and enough ahead of time that you can take maintenance actions and avoidance actions, say at the next planned shutdown for that facility, as opposed to having an unplanned shutdown, which is very expensive economically and can be dangerous in situations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The way you're describing this is kind of forcing an analogy in my mind. I've been talking to a lot of people all summer, every summer, talking to people about recruiting, and what you're describing seems very similar to me to the way that some companies treat their recruiting process, right? We're going to wait for somebody to leave and then we're going to grab them. And it's very evident to the outsider watching these things happen how horribly inefficient and costly that can be.
Right.
And yet, if you don't know another way, you don't know another way, So it's I'm in agreement with you. Having systems, having a consistent monitoring of these sorts of things, pretty important. Okay, so the value proposition makes sense to me there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned these long sales cycles, and I know you and I spoke about this a few weeks ago, and I thought, yeah, that's that's something that maybe we haven't heard in these interviews thus far. I mean, we have people that might have weeks long sales cycles and months long, and maybe even a year or 18 months. But you were describing kind of a decade long sales cycle, and the amount of strategy that must go into that was very impressive to me. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to think of the sales cycle as not the time to the initial sale, right? So when we talk about the capabilities of, let's use a hypothetical scenario where we're dealing with a plant that may be a little bit older. It's not brand new, and they're at an older stage of automation maturity, right? And now they want to move forward and become more efficient and become more effective without having to tear down and rebuild a whole, spend the capital associated with reworking an entire facility. So, typically when we initially engage with customers, they have a need that they've clearly identified, right? They've typically identified that they have a problem or a challenge. In some cases, we do that with discovery, through cold calling, through introducing ourselves to the customer. A lot of times that comes from marketing, through lead and demand generation from our marketing campaigns. And so there's typically a need that they have. Now, when we're selling software, oftentimes when you're selling hardware as well, this isn't unique to software. A plant will deploy software, a customer will deploy software, and they'll live with that software for an extended period of time. So it's not only important to meet the immediate need of that customer, but it's important in the sales cycle to work with that customer to understand what their needs are, to understand what their plans are. Not just that, hey, I maybe have a downtime issue, or I want to optimize my power consumption in the next year or two with this project. We can do that. A lot of vendors can do that. So I think the discussion really becomes understanding the customer, understanding their needs. Why are they doing that beyond the obvious? What are their plans? Is this plant going to grow? Is it going to expand? Does this company have a fleet of plants that are in a similar situation? Because oftentimes when buying industrial solutions, and this is particularly the case with software, customers are really buying into a platform. And what do I mean by a platform? It means they're going to live with that software for a long time. So the software that we sell, we talked about technical sales, meaning that the products that you sell, in our case software, right, fit into a larger system, right, that these companies use to operate. So there's a great deal of energy and expense, more importantly, maybe expense for our customers, in integrating our software with hardware that they may have for other vendors, with software that they may have from other vendors, with Microsoft, SAP, more business system side software, of course, with the industrial hardware and the control equipment that's within those facilities. So when they're making this decision, they're really choosing a platform for the next 10, 20. We have customers that have been with us for 30 plus years, right? That have been building on the platform. And of course, we revise technology as we move from, DOS and Unix to Windows to new embedded IoT devices and to the internet, into cloud-based capabilities. But it's a continuum, and there's a platform where, and the reason they work with us as a vendor as opposed to building these solutions themselves is because we can migrate those applications that they built. It's simpler for them to build using our tools, and then we as a vendor take the responsibility for moving those solutions forward. So we really have to think, and we want to work with customers and ensure that they understand where are you looking to be in 5 years and 10 years, and how is this platform part of that strategy? And so I mentioned, design, operate, optimize. We don't do all of those things for every customer we work with. But the capability of that portfolio is available to every customer that we work with. So if they think down the road that, hey, I'm going to be moving from simple supervisory control to predictive analytics, to use the example that we talked about, for them, a lot of times a powerful consideration is, hey, this is a platform I'm choosing that has that capability that's easy to adopt that new capability when I'm ready to do it, as opposed to buying a point solution today and then buying another point solution 3 or 5 years down the road, and now having to figure out how to make those things work together and take the risk that if at some point they don't work together, they become incompatible, the need then to replace part of that platform. So as we talk with our customers, that's really an important consideration. And I think for any and I think that's general for any technical sale, that of course you want a good relationship with your customer over time. You want to be a partner to them in solving the problems and the challenges that they have. And in doing that, it's always important to understand not just what they're doing today, but what's their strategy and where their plans for the future. But particularly so with these things that are our platforms, meaning that they provide a lot of additional value down the road, but also require a lot of commitment to deploy on the part of the customer. So, we may get to an initial sale in a year, 18 months, but we again work with a lot of these customers for decades and have for decades. So I think it's really important, and as you talk with your students, you think about technical sales, I think that's one of the things that's really important in technical sales, is to bring a credibility of, hey, yes, I'm here obviously representing a company to sell one of the offers that we have, but I'm also here to understand your business and to really provide a consultative approach to help you as a customer better understand how this platform not only fits your immediate needs, but also your future needs.
Yeah. Well, and I'm imagining, I don't know that I can think of a single company that wouldn't say, yeah, we're consultants. We take a consultative approach, but the difference probably comes from actually having the expertise to be that consultant, right? It's not just the good nature. It's not just the intent. It's the ability to deliver on that promise, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting because anybody can say that, and I also say anybody can do that if they commit to it and they do it the right way, Willie. Right? I think really the measure there is not some secret technology or capability that's hidden away, that's protected by patent or hidden. It's really a commitment as a company to work with customers as partners and to be there for the long term. And I think. Again, as I said, as we look at that, it really is about that long term, and it's about committing to that. And for us, one of the ways that we realize that and have realized that through our history is through our partner network. So we have a large ecosystem of third-party partners, so independent distributors, value-added resellers, systems integrators, solution providers who take our technology and build solutions on top of that for their customers, and then use their sales force to go to market to sell those solutions. That's what solution providers do. But we have a large ecosystem of well over 5,000 partners globally that we work with. And that's another important consideration for customers when they buy into a platform, right? Is what's the ecosystem that's there to support that platform? So of course we can think of, Microsoft is an obvious example today. So is Google, so many of these cloud companies that have these huge ecosystems built around them, right? So it's not enough to say this one vendor has to solve every problem, right? But I have an ecosystem of partners with service capability, with knowledge of the software and the platform to technically deploy that, and to deploy that not just locally and where I am today in Denver, Colorado, if there's a facility here, but we also have a facility in China. We also have a facility in Brazil. We also have a facility in Eastern Europe. How are we going to bring resources together to solve this problem consistently across those regions? So an ecosystem is a very important part of that as well, right? So for customers to feel comfortable to understand that, hey, there's other companies here that understand this technology that can help me apply it. I'm not just beholden to one vendor, and I have many resources that can assist me, whether that's, in our case, local distributors who don't just resell our product, but they provide local technical support and training, meaning local in the local language and the local time zone, right? So if we're dealing with a customer, if we have a support center, say in Houston, and we're dealing with a customer in Eastern Europe, they have an ecosystem of people locally who can support them. And again, that becomes super important when we're talking about particularly these industrial facilities where, with the example we gave earlier, downtime or problems can be extraordinarily expensive, right? So the importance of an ecosystem to a platform and vendors who have demonstrated the commitment, right, to support customers and that ecosystem, also supporting that ecosystem to support customers, is super important, right? And I think that's another part of technical sales, frankly, is to understand it's not just if you're a customer, well, it's not me just selling you a piece of software or a piece of equipment. It's really who are the other companies that can provide service, that can help deploy that can help integrate those solutions for the customer.
Yep, makes sense. Now, in terms of the day-to-day, what are you doing to keep an eye on what the needs might be 5, 10 years down the road? How do you actually go about navigating this long sales cycle?
Yeah, so at AVEVA, we have, portfolio and technology people. We have a chief product officer. We have chief technology officers who look at these trends. So if we pick something like AI, which was kind of around 10 years ago, but wasn't nearly as hot a topic, right? Part of that is understanding AI and the capabilities. There's different types of AI. There's, of course, generative AI, which is, I think, what we're most familiar with now, is in the news all the time, ChatGPT and the other functions. Again, predictive analytics is a form of AI, right? So at AVEVA, that's just one example where, over the past 10 years, we've really kept an eye on AI, and we've integrated that, I'll say, appropriately, right, into our software. We infuse AI into a lot of what we do. We're not ChatGPT, we're not Microsoft, right? But we can use those capabilities of AI. We have some of our own AI. We can leverage other AIs, and again, through partnerships, become important. One recently is we just announced a partnership with Databricks, who's a large company more in the IT space, right? So I'll use IT. You may hear me say OT. That means operational technology, right? Operations technologies, plants versus information technology, which is kind of the more standard IT that we're all familiar with, right? And they solve right data problems by standardizing data platform and allowing right companies to more quickly adopt and build not just AI but other solutions as well. AI is a big part of it. So that's an example where we partner with a company like that, and that brings a ton of benefits. So customers who use our platform can connect it, natively, I'll say automatically to a platform like Databricks, which solves sort of a different set of problems. But a lot of the industrial data that the IT teams never really had visibility to, they can now not only get visibility to, but integrate. Of course, we can provide all that information to IT on our platform natively as well. So it really becomes a place where the customer, with our, again, technical sales, right, our consultative sales approach, decides what's the best approach to solve this problem. Are they already heavily invested in another platform, and how can we integrate to that platform the industrial data that our systems capture, so that they can use that? Or again, do they need a platform that we can provide to do those things and integrate other solutions to that platform? So you have to have a lot of flexibility when you start to operate at that enterprise level, and you're bridging these operations technology to the information technology infrastructure. So I think that's another aspect of a platform really, is that it provides optionality to the customer, right? They're not locked in. There's multiple ways to solve a problem, and they can solve the problem in the way that best fits their needs and their already deployed technology and investments. So I hope that makes sense too, but I think it's important. So as we look at these technologies, and AI was just one example, we look at those over time and determine, hey, how does that fit? How does that make sense? We also have extensive customer boards, right? Meaning customer experience boards. So we'll have meetings with our customers. We have annual conferences for customers to come to, and we'll meet with important customers, understand how they're deploying our software, what are the new challenges that they're seeing, what are the changes that are coming, are there regulatory changes that are coming, are there other major technological shifts, AI, most recent example, right, that they want to take advantage of. So those are all kind of inputs to our process, right, in terms of deciding where we're going to invest our money to build, what we feel is the best platform for our customers.
Gotcha. So really it's more about these kind of macro level market trends and economy and, all of these big external forces.
Yeah, I think it is. I think, and I think, at times we'll do things where particularly innovative customers will bring approaches, and that looks like we can generalize that, and that's great, right? But I think as we deal in platforms and as we deal with customers, we want to do that in a sustainable way. So building super highly customized solutions that are only going to fit one customer probably doesn't serve that customer the best in the long term, right? Because our ability to say, hey, we're going to support that for 30 years, like some of we have our other technologies, may not quite be the same. And I think part of it too, we talk about technical sales, the consultative portion of it, right? Part of it too is bringing new ideas to your customers, right? So when we're talking about technical sales, the value isn't just in knowing your product and its application, but it's also in knowing the trends. So if we're talking to a food and beverage customer who may be looking at adopting new technologies or expanding, we have the experience and say, hey, we have hundreds of other food and beverage customers, and here's a trend that we're seeing, right? We've seen that they've effectively been able to reduce maybe downtime in packaging equipment. Is that a problem that you're having? Because there's a solution out there that's available if it is. And that may not be the reason that we initially contacted or worked with that customer. But so I think that's kind of generally the challenger sales methodology, right? Is when you bring new information to a customer based on your experience of working across hundreds of customers. Many of our customers work in their plants and their systems, right? So they may not, even those are industry trade groups and all that stuff where they try to share best practices, there may be some new information we can bring and some new opportunities that we can bring to them as well. And I'd argue that that's squarely part of technical sales as well, and part of that consultative aspect, and not just demonstrating competence, but bringing real value over and above just vending a piece of software or a piece of equipment to a customer.
Now, another thing that you mentioned in our prior conversation was this, you said that sales is a probabilistic process, I think are the words you used.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is exactly how I try to explain it to our students and get them on board with, we're telling you to do it this way, not because it's going to work 100% of the time, but because it's going to improve your odds. You still might get no's, you still will get no's. But what does that mean to you, and how does that inform your day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I think that goes back to sort of that broader sales cycle. I think that we talked about a little bit. So I think as we look at sales, I think a lot of times, look, I'll say myself, right? When I came out of college, and I didn't have a lot of experience with professional sales, and I'll say I probably didn't have that high an opinion of sales as a profession because I didn't understand it as a profession, right? Yeah. I understood the prototypical kind of pushy salespeople stereotypes that are out there. So I think professional sales is about that. It's about being professional. It's about using a solution selling approach in our case, right? We have a very structured approach in how we communicate with customers and how we develop opportunities with customers. And so to us as a business, it's important to understand and be able to forecast, right, how much we think we're going to be able to sell, just like it is for our customers, to forecast how much they're going to be able to sell. So What I mean by probabilistic is, I mean, right from the demand generation through to the closed sale, and we have systems like Salesforce, right, that you can use solution selling methodologies with, where you can track and you can understand what your conversion rates are. So I get automation qualified leads. So hey, I get some leads on my website. Those go through some steps of automation. They may be nurtured. So you may determine that hey, this lead isn't ready to move forward to a sale yet, but we'll continue to nurture that electronically. Either sometimes people do that, sometimes we do that with systems. More and more we do that with AI, right? And once we understand that they're ready, then we can move them forward into a lead we can pass to sales. Sales has to qualify that lead. Not all of those are qualified. And then as you look at a solution selling process, and whatever process you use, there's different ones out there, but they all generally, hey, who's your economic buyer? Do you make sure you have all your bases covered? And it's important, again, in professional sales to understand that, to understand the environment of the customer that you're working with, to make sure that you really have a thorough understanding of that situation. Number one, so that you can forecast it correctly, because as a professional salesperson, part of your job is to forecast with confidence to your management. And it's typically not acceptable to say, well, you don't win them all. We did our best, right? Typically you want to say, hey, we understood the situation. We understood the economic value. Again, understanding what the customer needs to accomplish. If a customer says they have a downtime problem, how big is that problem? How much does that cost you? Is that a major issue in your overall objectives and initiatives? You might go, hey, that costs us $1 million a year. Wow, that sounds like a huge problem. Yeah, we've got problems that cost us $50 million a year. So that's pretty low on the list of things that we're going to allocate budgets to resolve. Even though it could save us $1 million, we've got bigger issues we want to focus on. So again, a solution selling methodology lets you professionally address all of those concerns and build the strongest case you can. And the strongest, yes, technical sales, the sales part of that, right? So technically it fits, it does the things that you need to do, it's going to result in an outcome. And I can translate that to the economic benefit, either through avoided costs, right, reduction in downtime, improved throughput, improved capacity, higher revenue, right? Again, ultimately at the CEO level, those are kind of the two big measures is revenue and cost, right? That's how they get the profit. So if I can lower revenue, I can, increase revenue, not lower, increase revenue, lower cost, I can improve profitability. So understanding how to articulate that case. And that's important, not just from a making the case, but that also is super important in the negotiation phase, which you will get into if you're successful with customers. And customers have professionally trained buyers who are trained to negotiate with vendors, right, to get the best price possible. So understanding the economic value of what you as a seller bring to the table and being able to articulate that in the terms of the customer, not in terms of another customer, your experience or your best estimate, but in terms of data, validated data that you have from the customer, right, makes a very strong case for not only allowing you to be the vendor of choice in some cases, but also then to, or hopefully in most cases, but then also to negotiate from a position of strength and a position of clear economic value. And so when we talk about that being probabilistic, right, if we go all the way back to the beginning of that, you're not going to close 100% of those. But as a professional salesperson, you'll understand the phases of the sales and you'll understand the probabilities of those. And hopefully you'll have enough opportunities, right, that you'll be able to make a solid forecast that you can commit to and that you can make right to the business.
I always like to tickle the students' brains with this idea of, even if you're the best, you're still just getting told no. You're still, we don't have time for this. You're still facing more no's than yeses, almost across the board. And it's a weird way to win. It's weird to take a beating and then have your boss say, "Hey, you hit quota. You're doing great." And you're going, "Man, it feels weird to do great." I don't feel like a hero every meeting I have, every call. At the end of some days, I'm yanking my hair out and very frustrated. But then my boss says, "Hey, good job. Keep up the good work." Oh, okay. Get some dissonance from that.
Right. Well, I certainly think sales benefits from a positive outlook and attitude, right? I am not a psychologist, and I don't know, but I remember reading about a principle where we tend to remember the positive things and not the negative things in retrospect, right? And so all those no's kind of pale in comparison to a few good yeses, right, in terms of what you can do. And I want to tie that back to the why, Willie. Like we talked a little bit about the why with AVEVA, right? And to know that we're making a difference. We have most companies, right, have their company culture or whatever. Our company culture here is very, very based on the why and the impact that we have, our four kind of meaningful values and behaviors that we try to drive through all the way from our senior management through the organization are having an impact, right? And we mean having an impact. We're dealing with big industrial companies. So if you're a person who cares about sustainability and cares about these things, right? Well, we understand that our individual habits contribute to that, but also large industry uses most of the power, uses most of the resources, right? So we can go help our customers in the industry be more efficient with those things. So we really believe that we have an impact, right? We lead with aspiration, right? We want to be innovative. We want to bring new solutions and new capabilities to the table and help customers realize new ways to do things. Again, to serve that value of impact. Trust is super important, and that goes to as a professional salesperson. I talked about the stereotype of salespeople earlier, right? Integrity and honesty are paramount. In the business, for me, I've been in this business for 35 years. I've had relationships with customers, with partners, and with people inside my company and other partner companies for 35 years, right? And you can't maintain those relationships if you don't have integrity and you're not honest. So that's super critical. But also, as is curiosity, right? So for me, I came from my mechanical engineering degree. That was my background. I grew up in the 80s. I loved computers. I loved cars and mechanical things. So I went and got a mechanical engineering degree and kind of happened into automation. Didn't really know much about it, right? In high school, I couldn't have told you really what automation, maybe a robot. That's what I could have told you. Didn't really understand processes and things like that and manufacturing. But this was a great place for me to land because I love both of those things. We're applying computer technology and software to write mechanical systems and manufacturing and industry. And so I love it. So I'm very curious. And one of the things I enjoy when we go see customers is learning about what are they doing? How do they make the things that they're making? What's the impact that they have? What's the value they have to customers? So curiosity is huge on that a scale as well of things that you need, right, to be a good salesperson. It's curiosity, not just with how they're doing those things, but what are the business implications of that? What are the problems they're having? How do they solve that? Being curious is key. And so you can do all those things and still get a no. And that's okay, because a lot of times, I think the other thing when you're a professional salesperson, a no is just an opportunity to ask another question, to understand, okay, well, why is it a no? And maybe you can revive that opportunity, or you can learn from that opportunity. So why is it a no? What did we not effectively communicate, right? Was there technology a bad fit? Did we not make the right business case? What did we not learn? And some of those lessons you'll learn the hard way. Early in my career, we spent a year pursuing what was at the time, for me in my career, a very large opportunity. And we were dealing with a technical buyer who said, well, we have to do all these technical evaluations and make it to you and, three others. One by one, we eliminated the other three, and we thought we were in great shape. And our buyer, who was an engineering lead, right, got the budget. This is a problem. We're going to solve this. We spent a year. Not a solid year, but you give this offer, you go do things over the course of a year. We invested a lot of resources. I invest a lot of my time personally to sell this. And the time came to close the deal, and things started softening a little bit. A salesperson, your heart falls in your stomach a little bit, like, well, wait a minute, we did everything that we were asked to do and we had to do. But it turns out we lost that deal. And when I asked why, Said, okay, we've invested a lot of time and effort here, and you got to be polite and not upset, even though you might be. Why did we lose that? Well, we decided that the fleet of trucks needed an upgrade. So in my mind, I thought I was competing with these three other vendors that I was used to competing with for the same solution and whatever. But again, I was a young salesperson. I didn't understand the economics of the situation, right? I just took the word of the main person I was working with at the customer that, oh yeah, don't worry about it. If you win this technical evaluation, you're in. But his boss's boss was looking at, I got a budget to spend, and I'm either going to spend it on this project in the plant, or I'm going to spend it upgrading the fleet of trucks that we use to ship our goods. So I joke that we lost a software sale to a fleet of trucks, but it goes to, and the lesson learned, right? And so that's a no where you learn a lesson, and that one you learn about one time, right? Hopefully you can avoid it because there's better solution selling and more professional selling training around than there was when I started, or at least than I was aware of when I started, I should say, well, because maybe it was out there. I just didn't have the information. But it's learning and development. So the no's can be okay as well. But yeah, if you're uncomfortable with a no, you're going to get a lot more no's than you're going to get yeses. But there's opportunity in no's. That's the way to think of it, right?
Well, and as you're describing these situations, I'm imagining that anything that is, selling this platform, almost certainly involving a lot of different people in the buying center, on the buying team. What does that typically look like for you? How many people, what roles, what different types of people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it varies a lot, right? I'll say if we have customers who have a well-defined need and they're only going to buy one piece of software and that's all they're going to buy, it could be a very small team, maybe one or two people in some cases. It can be somebody and their manager that are making that decision. When you get to larger, I'll say that's more of a product sale, right? When you get to larger platform sales where companies are making decisions about, hey, we're strategically thinking about not only today but forward. Those can be larger teams over time, right? They can be, there can be dozens of people sometimes. But I think even in those scenarios, you can identify, and again, as through solution selling training and through experience, you learn to do this. You'll identify who the key players are. So there typically aren't 24 key players, right? There's typically a handful, 3, 4, 5. There's an economic buyer or maybe two that are making the economic decision, right? There's technical buyers that are ultimately responsible. And typically the larger the system gets, the more people are involved, the more senior they are as well, so that they can make those decisions and commit the company on behalf of maybe large organizations that report to them. So it is really important to identify kind of in solution selling language, who's your champion, right? Who's your economic buyer? Who's your technical buyer? Who's likely to have objections, understanding where those objections come from and how you're going to handle those objections. Are they price objections? Are they cost objections? Are they technology objections? And they can be, again, I remember early in my career, they can be something as simple as one little thing a competitor does that you don't do, right? Yeah. And if you can't effectively, it's unlikely you can change your product in a sales process to meet that. Sometimes you can, unlikely that you can. So that's why you have to build a bigger economic case, and you have to understand, well, what's the value of that one thing? Because your competitors also have their champions. They also use solution selling, right? So they may be somebody who says, well, this product does feature ABC. One that I can think of, this was 30 years ago, so not particularly relevant today, but gives you an example how small these could be. So if you think about trends, which are where we plot measurements from sensors on a chart over time. So think about a line chart, right? What's a temperature or a pressure or a speed of a piece of equipment, et cetera, over time. But a competitor that says, oh, we can put 16 pens or 16 data items on one trend. And at the time, the piece of software I was selling, we only do 8. Now, never mind the fact that when you put more than about 4 of those on one chart, you can't tell what's going on.
It's uninterpretable, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But it became a technical objection. 16 is greater than 8, that's better. We should go with a competitive vendor. So what you have to do in those cases, right, is really understand the value, understand what you're selling, and then really understand the value. Okay, who's that one feature valuable to and why?
Yeah.
We ended up winning a lot more of those than we lost, but every once in a while we'd lose one of those because somebody had a well, this number's bigger than this number, so therefore that's the. And again, those are cases where you're not really engaged in a sales process. Would be my argument. You're engaged in a bid against a specification or something like that. And in that case, you're really only vending. You're providing a product and a price, and you're competing against a lot of other people, and the customer may or may not be happy with the choice that they make. So with solution selling, you can understand and navigate around those types of objections a lot better.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an interesting. We sometimes will talk about prioritizing. Understanding how the customer prioritizes the different problems or the different needs or the aspects of the solution. Yeah, I really want a car that's red. Okay, well, here's some red cars, but they're the wrong style, they're the wrong shape, they're the wrong engine size. You'd like it if it were red, but if that's number 20 on your priority list, then maybe we focus on the bigger stuff.
Yep. And if you knew that there were red and white and black cars, and you didn't know that there was a green or a gray one, you might not even understand what your options are, right? So that's part of the role of a consultative salesperson is to broaden that field of view sometimes for your customer.
Absolutely. And how often are the people you're talking to, highly technical themselves? And then how often are they, I imagine people, C-suite folks are maybe more interested in ROI and ease of implementation than show me the spec sheet. I mean, what's the percentage breakdown of those things?
Yeah, boy, it's hard to put an exact percentage on it because it varies from engagement to engagement. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when you're dealing with an engineer who has to solve the problem, and that's a market we sell to a lot, they can be very technical because that's their nature. Not all engineers, not to generalize, right? But they're technical thinkers. Management, you start to get up into operations manager, VP of operations, people who have either P&L or larger KPI responsibility will tend to take a broader view of things, right? Yeah. So yes, it's got to technically fit or it's got to technically work. That's kind of non-negotiable. We have to see a way to a solution that provides value. But there may be more than one way to skin a cat, so we're willing to look at other things. And then in very large sort of platform sales opportunities, by the time you're talking to folks at the C-level about specific opportunities, like with our customers and our customer conferences, we talk with a lot of folks at senior levels of management, but in a specific sales engagement, once you get to that level, the technicalities are pretty much resolved, right? That's a gate to even get to that level and typically at that level, you don't have 10 people competing with you. You may have one other, or you may have, and I always say this too, like the biggest competition, I don't say it, I didn't make it up. It's a fact in anything. The biggest competition you always have is we're just not going to do anything. Right. We're just going to continue with what we have. So that's always your competitor. Even if you're the only person at the table at that point, you've got a competitor, which is, well, we could just not spend the money and live with things the way they are and see how it turns out next year. But at that point, you might have one other or maybe two other competitors. Typically, the senior executives don't want to spend a lot of time with vendors trying to
dissecting the whole thing. Yeah.
They have teams that will vet those and screen those before you get to that level. So typically at that level, it's about the economics, and you want to be able to provide a very strong economic case. So if you're presenting to business executives, you don't want to talk about speeds and feeds, and you don't want to talk about the features and functions of the product. You want to talk about the economic benefit of solving the problem and how your approach can help them solve that problem.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of my favorite things over the course of a semester working with students is getting them to realize that, you have the same solution, and yet the people that you're working with are buying it for completely different reasons, right? This lady's buying ease of implementation. this guy's buying, the best technical specifications. This person's buying a stress-free weekend because this is something he worries about all the time.
Right.
And you go, it's the same solution, maybe emphasizing different aspects of it, and yet people are the value as they perceive it can be wildly different. I'm seeing that we're probably running out of time here. I think the last thing I wanted to ask you about was what are the characteristics broadly interpreted, the behaviors, the personality types, the knowledge, the whatever, the characteristics of the salespeople in an industry like yours that are just killing it? What does somebody need to bring to the table?
It's a great question. I think we've talked about a lot of it, but I'm going to go back to, again, one of our core values, which is really curiosity, right? And not curiosity to the point that you're asking annoying questions or that you're diverting from the point, but innately having curiosity makes it easier to ask that next question, and that next question needs to be the right question, right? It needs to lead in the right direction. But I think that curiosity, of course, trust, of course, aspiration, of course, integrity, of course, all of these things. But I really think it's the curiosity to say, hey, and that's part of what makes taking all those no's, easier, is that, hey, there's another other opportunity out there. So of course, optimism we talked about, but curiosity to say, hey, I want to learn about these businesses. I want to learn how we as a company and how I as a salesperson can help my customer as an individual in their company and their company as a whole, right? Meet their goals, right? And do better. And in our case, that why is super important, as we talked about before, to make efficient use of resources in a sustainable way, right? To grow in a sustainable way. But it's really that curiosity to say, hey, where's the next opportunity? And how can I find, even once I've won an opportunity, then how can I find the next opportunity with that customer? I don't want to just move on, because it's always easier to grow business with an existing customer than to go win new customers, although super important that you do both, right? So sometimes, right, that's sort of obvious that it's easier to win more business with an existing customer, but you can't exclusively focus on that. You have to make sure that you've got a good mix of new customers that are coming to your business at all times. But I think curiosity above everything really drives that, right? The desire to learn more, to understand more, because that's how, again, when we talk about consultative selling and the challenger sales methodology, that's how you're going to bring new information to your next customer, right? And I'm not talking about giving away trade secrets of how one customer does something, but generally understand the trends and the problems and customers that customers of a certain type face. And that's going to make you more valuable as a salesperson to those customers. And that's going to lead to more sales, to faster sales, to easier closes on sales, all of those things. I think it's all driven from curiosity.
Nice. Yeah, we have one of the recurring research projects that we do with a different cohort of companies every year. We call it the Sales Performance Consortium. And, looking at these competencies that are driving sales success in different companies and how they vary across companies, but then how they vary across roles as well within a company. And one of the things that pretty consistently comes up is this curiosity issue. So I appreciate that's been reiterated here, and it makes sense, right? It's hard to fake interest. It's hard to fake caring. You either want to know the answer to this question, you either want to dig a little bit deeper and directed toward the customers, but also to underline everything that you've shared earlier. Other solution partners, other vendors, other things that we need to be curious about to know how to really solve problems for our customers. So
yeah,
I think that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think it also leads to continuing education and continuous improvement, right? You always want to be learning more through your whole career, and curious people just do that naturally every day, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time. I thought this was great, Steve. I'm glad you could share these insights with us, and hope the students get a lot out of it as well.
You bet. Willie, thanks so much for having the discussion. I really enjoyed it. Best of luck to you with the program, and best of luck to your students. Again, I think there's great careers out there in technical sales, and it's been a great career for me and so many people that I know. So I wish the best of luck to all your students, Willie.
That's it for this interview. I hope you got something valuable out of it. Of course, if you did, be sure to subscribe and rate this podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.